after surviving the infinite hells of the phases and returning to his previous world. What would happen if Touma gained the nearly infinite magic powers of Offinus, which would allow him to change the universe forever? Kamijo Touma is the main protagonist of a certain magical index, and apparently an ordinary high school boy with an OP right hand, which can nullify almost any supernatural power, which also happens to have dragons inside. Yeah, normal. But what if he was even less normal? Like if he was God, but not just any god, a magic one. Just like Offinus, being able to manipulate reality on a universal scale. Not gonna lie, due to Touma being an Esper and nowhere near close to mastering magic, this likely will never happen in the canon unless Kamachi takes drugs again. But hey, I think it would be cool to say, what if Offinus transferred her magic god powers to Touma, Rukia and Ichigo style? Even if it is logically dumb as hell. Magic god Touma just looks too badass. He deserves his story in my opinion. And credit to all these fan artists who have drawn him. Links in the description. We start off immediately after the end of New Testament Volume 9, with Offinus restoring Toma's phase after countless years with each other, the two of them returning to the man-made island of Sargasso, just off the coast of Tokyo. Except something had changed about Offinus. She bestowed all her powers to Touma, with Offinus also believing that he may be able to find a better use for her powers, as opposed to the damage she caused to the world via her own selfish ambitions to return to her former world. Maybe Touma will be able to save others on a much larger scale than he normally would with just Imagine Breaker. By doing this, Offinus might think Touma would be better suited to the role of a god. But the huge negative is that she won't be able to make fun of him no more for being a foolish human. Magic god Offinus will lend her serious dripped outfit to Touma. But wait, wouldn't that mean she's wearing nothing now? Alright, don't overthink it. Don't even imagine Touma wearing that skimpy outfit in the freezing cold. The hat, cloak and eye patch will do. We gotta remember something else that's important. Touma rejected the chance to become the scorer of the magic gods in New Testament Volume 13. He would likely be conflicted about having this new form, as the gods offered him to be their representative on Earth, as they were unable to come to any joint decisions about how the world should be structured. Touma originally thought that his existence was meaningless, as Offinus could just save everyone in existence with her power, but later realized that he had to be selfish, to erase the happiness of the perfect world, to restore his own reality. But at this moment, following the events of New Testament Volume 9, Touma still had doubts over his decision, as proved later on in New Testament Volume 10 in his fight against Misaka, where he was concerned whether he truly did the right thing, and needed Misaka's electrocuting Talk no Jutsu hug to shatter his illusion. Therefore, if Touma did have Offinus's powers, there is a chance that he would use them. For the sake of this fanfic, yes, he will. I don't want people saying, this is so out of character for Touma. Literally, this is a fanfic. I decide what happens, so screw you. The problem Touma now faced will be to convince the world that Offinus deserves to live. And of course, to try and save Offinus from the fairy spell, which is slowly killing her. I think Touma would at least try his usual method of telling everyone that they're not living their lives correctly, by saying that Offinus shouldn't be executed for her terrorist activities. But the most convenient way to save her wouldn't be to travel halfway across the world, like in New Testament 10, when Touma had to battle numerous bosses in order to try and save Offinus. Instead, it would be far more easy to remove Offinus's fairy spell via magic, by altering the phase or layer of reality covering the universe, where it doesn't even exist in the first place. Touma would be desperate to save Offinus knowing him, so this would be the most convenient solution to do that, even if he may feel conflict of using the same power that brought him so much pain instead of his trusty right hand. Touma very well knew that Offinus's power could be used to not only save the entire world, but also create a perfect utopia where no one suffers. He would be aware that now he would be able to restore that same place if he so wished, but would choose not to, at least at this moment in time, owing to his selfish desire to keep the current world. If Touma could quickly solve one problem in the form of the fairy spell, then it wasn't a big deal, right? One minor simple change to the world could be excused, as it still would be, in essence, the same place he was familiar with. However, the problem still remained. He was now faced with his friends and allies, Misaka, Index, Birdway, and Lessar. Not only was Touma siding with Ofnus to protect her, but he now strangely wore similar attire to the Norse magic god. They didn't know what Touma had experienced with Ofnus, and that he spent an incomprehensible amount of time with her and became her understander. They would question what Touma was even doing, and what the hell happened to him, with Touma explaining he must convince everyone that Ofnus doesn't deserve to die for her actions. But at the same time, she should face some form of justice, but not in the form of execution. While Ofnus would start to contemplate if she even should have lived, with Touma removing the fairy spell from her and what her purpose truly is, now that she's a world-renowned criminal. Misaka and Birdway would question if Touma has gone mad and may have tried to attack him to put some sense into him. Touma would repel their attacks with Imagine Breaker and find cover with Ofnus. Since Ofnus had transferred her powers to Touma, she could no longer use her magic either. Touma then begs his allies to listen to him and attempts to explain briefly what happened in the phases. But that wasn't the only issue he would have to deal with, as Sargasso would be surrounded by the militaries of the world, specifically the US and Academy City, and Accelerator being deployed as well. The forces would take aim at Ofnus, and with Touma unable to convince Roberto Katse to stand down against her like he did in New Testament Volume 10, Ofnus would be an easy target, with the former magic god being assassinated before his eyes via a precision weapon. They would not hesitate to kill her. With this tragedy unfolding before Touma, he couldn't believe his eyes. How had he let this happen? What if this could all have been avoided if he simply immediately escaped to Denmark or elsewhere with Ofnus, rather than staying to use his new powers on her and attempting to reason with his friends? It had all ended in disaster. Oliverus had said in NT10 that Touma would become something akin to a monster if Ofnus were to die, and this monster wielded the hopes and dreams of all magicians, with Imagine Breaker in his right hand, and also the reality warping magic of a god. Touma would reject what had just happened by resorting to altering the universe once again, due to his failure to protect Ofnus successfully. But then, it made Touma realise, up until now, he had used Imagine Breaker as a means to become someone who would be selfless by saving and protecting the smiles of those around him. But ever since Ofnus had shown him the perfect world, he knew that he would never be able to live up to the same standards as she had set. He wanted to be selfish by bringing back his own world, by trampling on everyone else's happiness. But now that selfishness had resulted in the worst possible scenario, he had no choice but to fix it, with the only method he could use, even if it may have contradicted how he would normally set out to do things. Imagine Breaker was no longer enough to become the person he always wanted to be. It was Touma's selfish desire to now make the world his ideal one. He manipulated the phase and brought Ofnus back from the dead, but also changed far more than just that. Ofnus, who is now alive again, looks stunned. What did he just do? Just as Ofnus had done so before, Touma had changed the perspective of the entire world, making everyone accept Ofnus, just as Ofnus had once done so, with Touma on the receiving end. He thought this would make Ofnus happy, but quite the opposite. She was scared. The human she once knew had become exactly like her, with the absolute power corrupting him. Ofnus begged Touma to use Imagine Breaker to restore his original phase and relinquish the title of Magic God, but he refused. How could he go back to the nightmare that he had inflicted upon himself and Ofnus? Soon the other magic gods would take note of Touma's actions. Unlike Ofnus, who they viewed as a failure, they would be pleased that he would be the one interfering with the world, since they saw him as their potential representative outside the hidden world. I think at this point, they would attempt to contact Touma somehow to make him aware of their existence, and he might be able to unite the gods in terms of them wanting the same thing for the universe itself. It is also interesting that originally it's implied the magic gods also had a part saving Ophinus in NT10, when the fairy spell was about to kill her. But with Touma having the power of a god, they likely would feel no need to intervene this time. I also could definitely see Aleister Crowley delaying his plans for destroying the magic gods, and would work to try and turn Touma back to being a human to set his original plans back into motion. And if things became desperate, he would challenge Touma directly himself. I wonder who would win that battle, as with both Imagine Breaker and a magic god's power, Touma would be ridiculously strong, being able to nullify most of Aleister's magic, while also being able to warp reality to kill the different versions of Aleister. Maybe Aleister would be able to learn the fairy spell to use on Touma to devise a sneak attack, which might be the best chance for his success. As for what Touma would do in this new world, I could honestly see him spiraling down a path where he becomes increasingly skeptical over the structure of this universe, continually fixing problems with it until it became akin to the Omega phase, as Touma would now feel like his original world was not the best future for humanity or himself, believing that the only way he could be his ultimate ideal self would be ruling as a god, as Ophinus had once done, where he could make everyone happy. I could see Ophinus trying to talk him out of it, and even gathering up support in favour to try and oppose the new tyrant known as Touma. But due to his vast power, the only chance they would have would probably if they worked with Aleister or Iwaz. I think the will of the Musica Network may have also tried to talk to Touma and say, what the fuck happened? With Touma stating that he appreciated the emotional support she once gave him when he was at his most vulnerable in NT9 after realizing his existence was meaningless, but now sees this vision of the world as his means of fulfilling his selfish desire to become a savior. And ultimately, Will wanted Touma to simply follow his own path, regardless of how it may have affected others. It is ironic that Touma would not end up not only similar to Ophinus, but also Fiamma of the Right, by saving the world in this manner. But let me know what you think about how the events would transpire. Subscribe if you would like to see more Toharu videos on the channel, and check out these videos on screen for more Touma and Toharu content. Also, huge thanks to my patrons for voting for this video.